Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The opinions of hosts and guests do not necessarily reflect the opinion of this network.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is Ghost Talk with 187 PI. Sit back and prepare yourselves for an adventure into the paranormal world with host Shelly Robertson and 187 PI research team. Ghost Talk is broadcasting live from Ohio's most haunted jail. Learn about their ongoing research at the jail and abroad, investigation techniques, and their personal encounters. Here is your host of Ghost Talk and 187 PI founder, Shelly Robertson.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ghost Talk Radio. With me as your host, Shelly Robertson. Tonight, I have a very interesting show planned for you. I'll be taking you on a journey through some of the most haunted castles in the world. And first off, I'd like to invite all my listening friends out there tonight to join me in the chat room on Spreaker, where you can join in on the conversation and ask me any questions you might have. I want to say that some of the places featured in tonight's shows are some places that you can visit. So please, if you plan to visit, make sure you check out hours of operations and get any permissions or tickets required before going out and poking around, okay, folks? So tonight, there's lots and lots and lots of castles all over the world. And tonight we just got a handful of them, but some of the most interesting ones is what I'll be bringing to you tonight. Now, some of you may know, some of you may not know, that a castle is defined as a type of fortified structure. Most often, they were built in the Middle Ages, predominantly by nobility or royalty and by military orders. The structures in the early days were built of wood, but as the weaponry evolved, so did the build materials of castles, and this is when they started building them of stone and rock. And there is some fun facts about castles that I'm going to tell you about. The first castles were built by the Normans. The Great Age of Castles began almost 1,000 years ago, and they lasted for nearly 500 years. The Normans introduced the first proper castles, starting with the wood moat and bailey castles, to England, following their victory at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Now, that's a long time ago. See, they needed to protect their new kingdom, so as a result, the early years of Norman occupation saw a frenzy of castle building. Now, the Norman timber moat and bailey castles were quickly replaced by the permanent stone Norman castles, and that's as the weaponry evolved, Now, the biggest castle in England, do you know what it is, anybody? Want to take a wild guess? That's right. If you guessed the Windsor Castle, you would be correct. And it's one of the 3 homes to the Queen. It is said to be the largest inhabited fortress in the world. Windsor Castle was the first in a series of 9 castles that England's King William built around London during the 11th century. Windsor Castle occupies 13 acres and combines the features of fortification, a palace, and believe it or not, a small town. Now, the biggest castle in the world, not necessarily inhabited like the Windsor Castle, but the biggest castle in the world at about 1,870 feet in length and an average of 420 feet wide. Can you guess what it is? If any of you guess the Prague Castle, you would be correct. The Prague Castle is a castle complex in Prague, Czech Republic, and it was built in the 9th century. It is the official office of the President of the Czech Republic. The castle was the seat of power for kings of Bohemia, Holy Roman emperors, and presidents of Czechoslovakia. Now, on to some of the most haunted castles in the world. Okay. This first castle we shall visit is one that is on my bucket list, and believe me, I will make it there one day. And it is the Bran Castle in Romania, commonly known as Dracula's Castle. It is a national monument and landmark in Romania. The fortress is on the Transylvanian side of the historical border with Wallachia. The construction of the Bran Castle was completed in 1377 for military purposes. Now, over time, various towers were added, and in 1920, Queen Maria ordered its restoration. Probably one of the best-known castles of Romania, Bran Castle is identified for its hauntings and has been visited countless times by paranormal investigators. Locals know that many restless spirits haunt the place, and the castle has one location where a strong scent of violets can be smelled from time to time. Now, among the more famous spirits believed to be haunting the site are Vlad the Impaler and, of course, Queen Maria. Vlad the Impaler, he gained his name by ordering the impalement of thousands of live people. I know, that's horrific, right? A slow and horrific death resulting in a literal forest of impaled dead bodies. The castle is said to be haunted by the ghost of Queen Maria. And get this, folks. Her heart was locked inside the castle grotto after her. Believe that. And apparently, climbing to the top of the castle's tallest tower is a one-way journey, especially when there is a full moon present. It is said that the deranged ghost of Queen Maria will throw anyone to their death from the tower. All of the haunted castles in Romania, Castle Dracula has to be the most creepy. All would probably agree. And one next castle we're going to go on and visit is the Castle of Good Hope. And it is known locally as Cape Town Castle. And it is a bastion fort built in the 17th century in Cape Town, South Africa. Now, it was originally located on the coastline of Table Bay. Following land reclamation, the fort is now located inland. And in 1936, the castle was declared a historical monument, now a provincial heritage site. And following restorations in the 1980s, it is considered the best preserved example of a Dutch East India Company fort. Okay? Now, like I said, it was built by the Dutch East India Company, and it was built between 1666 and 1679. The castle is the oldest existing building in South Africa. Isn't that quite amazing? Many people say that screams, strange voices, and footsteps still terrify soldiers who guard the castle during the late night. Okay? The explanation of this, they are convinced that all of this activity lies in the bloody history of the castle and the restless spirits of those who were tortured there centuries ago. The castle was the center of civilian, administrative, and military activity at the Cape for 150 years, and also the site of gruesome punishments, torture, and executions. Eerie stories have been told of footsteps pacing along the battlements between the two bastions of Leederdam and Buren. And after World War II, folks, these sounds were accompanied by a floating human shape without legs. It is said this ghost to be that of a soldier who hanged himself in the bell tower 300 years ago. And that's not all that haunts this castle. There is also the ghost of a sad-faced woman. She's wearing a long gray cloak, and she walks through the castle at night. Then there is this ghost who loves to join parties. Would you believe? It is said it could be Lady Anne Bernard, who lived at the castle for 5 years back in 1797, while her husband was a colonial secretary. Her ghost has been seen at functions in the ballroom, clothed in a ball gown of that area. Pretty fascinating, right? So maybe go there and visit, and you can get you a dance with Miss Party Lady. This next castle we're going to visit is Moosham Castle in Austria. Now, this is one of the most haunted castles of the world, okay? And it's popularly known as Witch's Castle. Moosham Castle in Austria is a medieval castle in the Lungau region of Salzburg, Austria. This castle is situated at a height of 3,450 feet, and presently it is privately owned, but it's open to the public 7 days a week. The castle dates back to the 13th century, and it was built by Prince Bishop of Salzburg. It does have a strange past, though, folks. Hundreds of witches were beheaded, and it is believed that some still haunt this fortress, which runs as a museum now, and it's open to the public even for overnight stays, if you dare, right? Moosham Castle has been a site of gruesome witch trials, and wait till you hear this, not only witch trials, but werewolf hunts, okay? Yes, they hunted werewolves. It is believed that this castle is built on a foundation of a Roman fortress, and it was first alienated in 1191. Now, thinking about that, 476 AD to 1191 AD is considered as Dark Age for Moosham Castle, as there's no information on what happened during that time, okay? It is known that Prince Archbishop of Salzburg seized the castle in 1285, and he stayed there for several decades. At this period, numerous wars and conflicts were going on in and around Moosham Castle, and it is estimated that 45 battles were fought. Several wars soaked the ground near the castle in blood, and so you know what that's got to mean. Hauntings, right? Well, witch hunting and trials, it became a massive part of the normal lives in Europe and the U.S., and we all know this, when mass hysteria caused by people's irrational fear of witches living among them swept through the world. Now, the Moonsham Castle, it took center stage in Salzburg witch trials, which took place between the years of 1675 and 1690, all right? Over 100 people were killed during this period, and thousands were accused of being involved in witchcraft. They were imprisoned, tortured, and killed ruthlessly, right? Moonsham's trials of witches, they were not unique. The castle was Austria's largest and most infamous witch trial. The area was bounded by fear of witches and bloodshed in 1675, and these events were horrifically violent on the standard eras. The victims were tortured and murdered through hangings. 130 men and 26 women were accused and condemned of witchcraft. Most of them were beggars and homeless people. They were a part of mass hysteria engrossed by fear of disease and plague, spread by famine and post-war hygiene. And they had nobody that could vouch for their characters and their whereabouts. So you know what happened to them. Those who survived the hardships, they were branded and their hands were cut off. Believe it. They were burnt with iron brandings, marking them as criminals for their entire lives. The majority of the victims were men aged between 10 and 80 years old, and the methods used for confessions by victims were ghastly, and punishments, I'm telling you what, were dire. Not only that, folks, the Moonsham Castle in Austria has a history with werewolves. I know what you're thinking, but it's true. In the 1800s, many deer and cattle were found dead around the castle. Suspected people were rounded up and taken to the castle. Some of the residents of the castle were tortured and killed for being none other than a werewolf. The current owner of the Moonsham Castle states that the room of Tony was where the man behind all of this torture lived. Many people feel a dark presence around them. Various voices have been recorded during EVP sessions in the castle, and some people have felt something breathing on them. Many have felt hands and unseen presence near them in the torture chamber. Staff and visitors, many have reported being touched. They hear banging sounds, footsteps, doors being closed and opened suddenly, and many have spotted what appears to be shadow ghosts. Very interesting, wouldn't you say? On to the next castle on our travels is the Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. Now, let me tell you, folks, a lot of activity goes on here at this castle. Edinburgh Castle is one of Scotland's most recognizable and most haunted castle. This fortress towers high over Edinburgh from upon its rocky perch, known as Castle Rock. The land the castle exists upon, it's been occupied by humans since at least the Bronze Age, with the castle's construction commencing later in the 12th century. Since Edinburgh Castle was such an important stronghold for ruling Scotland, the rival English and Scottish monarchies have fought over and taken turns in occupying the castle throughout history. This resulted in many sieges and battles being fought at the castle. There is historical evidence suggesting that at least 26 sieges took place at the castle, making it one of the most besieged landmarks in the world. With so many battles, suffering, and death having occurred at Edinburgh Castle, it really comes as no surprise that it's considered to be haunted. And with that, folks, we have to take a short break. And when we come back, we will be talking about the hauntings. You're listening to Ghost Talk Radio on WBHM-DB.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk radio.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Ghost Talk Radio with me as your host, Shelly Robertson. And tonight we are talking about all the haunted castles of the world. Well, not all the haunted castles, but many of the haunted castles, a few of them. And prior to the break, we were talking about the Edinburgh Castle, and we will continue on with that. And it's very interesting. And a lot goes on there, and it's got a lot of history. There's many areas of the Edinburgh Castle and its grounds that are said to be haunted. The castle's dungeons are considered to be especially active. Former prisoners who perished either from poor living conditions, malnourishment, and disease or torture are still said to linger within the castle's walls. Many visitors claim to have sighted them or even heard them down there in that dungeon, right? Another ghost story of Edinburgh, it relates to a young piper boy. Now, after underground tunnels leading from the castle were discovered a few hundred years ago, people grew curious as to where they stretched, okay? Now, there's this entrance to these tunnels that was located down there, and this entrance to the tunnels, it was very small, and the opening was meant for someone small, so they sent this young boy down there to explore, okay? He didn't really want to go, but he was forced into the task, and he was instructed to play his bagpipes as he followed through the tunnel, right? Because the sound from the bagpipes allowed the people above ground to track where he was and follow his progress, okay? So this boy made it halfway down the Royal Mile before suddenly falling silent. Though there were some rescue efforts was attempted, the boy was never located. No one really knows what happened to the young lad. Well, we can all assume what happened, yet most people believe that he died down there. Now, legend has it that on a still, quiet night, you can still hear the muffled sound of the boy's bagpipes playing as he continues to search for a way out of the tunnel. All right? Strangely enough, another young boy with an instrument haunts Edinburgh Castle as well. And this young boy generally appears to people as a headless apparition and is always playing his drum. They say, if you see this spirit, it's a very bad omen, as he only appears right before the castle comes under attack. And it's been a long time since the castle's last attack, and no one has seen this spirit in a long time. So there's still a lot of mystery around this young boy, and nobody really knows who he was or why he was there at the castle. Another spirit that is commonly seen at the castle is that of a black dog. Now, this animal is often seen running around the castle's grounds before suddenly disappearing into thin air, and many people believe that this dog is somehow tied to the dog cemetery which exists at Edinburgh Castle. This small cemetery contains many soldier dogs, which some people believe could be the ghost dog, one of those. Yet, another spirit at the castle also met a tragic end. And this is the spirit of Janet Douglas, or also known as Lady Glamis. And she was accused of witchcraft by the current King of Scotland during the 1500s. After this accusation, Janet was thrown into the Edinburgh Castle dungeon. Okay, and her family and servants were then tortured to gain evidence against her of being a witch. Well, eventually, Janet was sentenced to death and burned alive at the stake at the castle with her young 16-year-old son watching. How horrific that must be. And many people claim this traumatic death has caused the Lady Glamis to return to the castle as a ghost, though she is also believed to haunt another Scottish castle that she once lived in as well. So she's a traveler. Now, one of the most interesting ghostly stories of Edinburgh Castle relates to how its paranormal activity has been investigated. And we don't usually hear too many stories like this, right? Well, in 2001, there was a study that was conducted that included over 200 participants, okay? And these people, they were moved through some of the most haunted areas of Edinburgh Castle without any prior knowledge of the ghost stories or supposed hauntings. Now, the findings show that more than half of the participants reported having an unexplainable paranormal experience during their time in the castle. These were surprisingly mainly reported within areas that are known to be haunted. Some reports included sudden temperature drops, seeing shadow figures, a feeling like their skin was burning, a feeling like being watched, and some even had their clothing tugged. Now, while these findings cannot conclude for certain that Edinburgh Castle is haunted, they are very, very interesting. Things happen to people unknowingly about the history. Now, Edinburgh Castle is open as a tourist attraction containing the Scottish Crown Jewels, the Scottish National War Monument, and Museum. So, you can go visit and check out all the paranormal activity for yourself. Next, on to Castle Fraser in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. There's a lot and lots of haunted places in Scotland, I must tell you. So we had to cover two because this was very interesting. Castle Fraser is easily, I'm telling you folks, easily the most elaborate Z-plan castle in all of Scotland, built by the sixth Laird of Fraser, Michael Fraser, who started construction plans in 1575, and he finally completed the building by 1636. Now, the most famous ghost of the castle is that of a princess who was murdered as she was staying here. The story goes that one night she came to the castle as a guest, and as she slept in the upstairs green room, not greenwood, as she slept in the green room, someone came in and murdered her. Now, nobody knows why she was murdered, but her attacker dragged her body down the stairs as part of his attempt to hide the crime. He was, of course, discovered and executed, and the princess was laid to rest. But the odd thing about the crime scene is that the blood stains on the stairs could never be removed, no matter how many attempts were made to do so. The blood just kept coming back. The stains kept coming back. Now, since the stains could not be removed, they were covered by the wooden paneling, which is what you see there today. As for the princess, she still lingers within the castle walls, and there's been many claims over the years of a ghostly mist-like figure floating silently through the hallways, and presumably that is the princess. Now, the kitchen here is also thought to be particularly haunted, and there's been many reports by the staff of hearing the sounds of children laughing or muffled singing coming from empty parts of the kitchen area. Oh, excuse me. Now, other paranormal activity here includes disembodied voices and whispers, as well as ghostly piano music heard in an empty hallway. A ghost in a long black gown has also been seen a number of times on the castle grounds, thought to be the spirit of Lady Blanche Drummond, who died at the castle in 1874. So, as you can see, a lot of activity goes on here, so it might be a place you would like to visit and see if you can experience some of the hauntings for yourself. Now, the next place we're going to go to, which I think would be kind of a really cool place to visit, plus there's other locations in the vicinity I would like to go to. And that is Himeji Castle, and it's in Japan, in Himeji. And it's a hilltop Japanese castle complex that's situated in the city of Himeji. And this castle is regarded as the finest surviving example of a prototypical Japanese castle architecture. And this castle comprises of 83 rooms, and it has advanced defensive systems from the feudal period. And, this castle dates back to, it's pretty old, folks, 1333. Himeji Castle is the largest and most visited castle in Japan, and it was registered in 1993 as one of the first UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the country. The area within the middle moat of the castle complex is a designated special historic site, and 5 structures of the castle are also designated national treasures. Can you believe that? That's pretty darn special, huh? The Himeji Castle is the largest castle in Japan and is allegedly the location for one of Japan's most famous ghost stories. Okay, there was this young, beautiful lady named Okiku, and she was blamed for the loss of a plate, like a dinner plate. There was a set of 10 plates, and they were a valuable family treasure. Only one got lost. Okiku counted the plates again and again, but could only find 9. And guess what the penalty was? You guessed it, folks. The penalty was death. Okiku was suspended over a well with ropes on the castle grounds. She was beaten and lowered in and submerged into the water to near drowning before being taken out again. So this is what happened. This repeated until she was eventually killed. They would lower her in the water, bring her up just before she drowned, beat her, and do it again. And they did this until she died. All right. After she died, her body was thrown into the well, and then it was covered. Okiku has since been seen to appear at the well, count to 9, then cry out in anger or fear, whatever you want to call it, shrieking, before disappearing again. Okay? Now it is said you can end Okiku's suffering, but just for a while, if you say 10 after she counts to 9. The plate's all accounted for. She can rest peacefully for a little bit until she appears to repeat her task. So it's kind of like a residual, kind of. Now, after that initial night of her, being killed and stuff, there were many nights Okiko's ghost would appear, or Yurimi, as what they call it. That's the Japanese. They describe this type of ghost. And a Yurimi is the spirit of someone who died in a sudden or during rash circumstances, and they're characterized by pitch black hair, a white dress, and dismembered, or they're missing hands and feet, or one or the other. And Okiku's Yurimi would climb out of the well and walk into the castle and check on the plates. The ghost would count the plates, and upon reaching 9 and not finding 10, the ghost would just shriek out unnaturally and then disappear. That's a little unsettling to witness, I would say. Now, on to the next place on our journey, which is the Eltz Castle. And the Eltz Castle is in Germany, folks. Burg Eltz is what they call it, or actually Eltz Castle. It's known by a few other names too. But anyways, it's a really beautiful castle that sits perched on top of a small hill in a gorgeous valley. I mean, you can just picture it, right? The castle itself is built out of rock, and it's surrounded by the Elsbach River, making the castle somewhat of an island. Now, the castle sits between Koblenz and Trier in the Rhine Valley of Germany, and it was originally built on a very popular trade route. Now, this is one of the few castles in the area that was never destroyed despite the numerous battles that ran on around it. This was due to the many alliances the family had built around the area and across Europe. And it was built in the 12th century, and believe it or not, folks, you will find this just astonishing. It is still owned by the Eltz family 33 generations later. Isn't that just fascinating? So now let's talk about the story of the haunting of Eltz Castle. Okay, so there's this girl, and her name was Agnes Eltz, and she was the daughter of Count Eltz that lived in the Eltz Castle centuries ago. Now, Agnes was surrounded by brothers, and she preferred to act and play as her brothers did, okay? So it's kind of like a tom girl. She didn't want to dress up in the cute little dresses and have tea. She rather dress up as a knight and, play with the boys, and she was strong-minded and feared nothing. And this was eventually her downfall, folks. Now, when she was a little girl, she was promised in marriage to the Knight of Braunsberg by her father. And this was very normal in this day and age. And mostly it was to strengthen the family and strengthen political relationships, so it's an arranged marriage. Now, Agnes eventually met the boy she was promised to, and instantly she had a strong dislike for him, okay? She felt he was boring, quiet, and aloof, and she normally chose to ignore him when he was around. In later years, he was invited to a large festival at the castle in preparation for their upcoming marriage, right? Now, during the festivities, Agnes ignored Braunsberg until he could no longer contain his anger. He went up to her, he grabbed her on the dance floor, and he was squeezing her tight, and he kissed her. So, as you can imagine, to his surprise and to the surprise of the partygoers, she responded with a quick and hefty smack across his face, right? Instantly. His anger boiled over, and in a rage, he took off his gloves and he threw them at the feet of the Etz family, and he stormed out of the castle. Uh-oh. Not a good sign. The family waited and prepared for an attack due to the disrespect that Agnes had shown the knight and his family. They waited weeks, yet no one came to attack. Then after a few months went by, the family relaxed and thought it was all safe. Now, due to feeling that the danger was over, the men in the family went out for a 3-day hunting trip, leaving the women and children behind. It was this very night that the alarm sounded and that castle was under siege. Knights under the command of Braunsberg attacked the castle, killing guardsmen as they came, over the wall of the castle. And Agnes was not going to sit still while her family's home was being attacked. So she put on her brother's armor and she went out to fight. She came across Knight Braunsberg himself, entering her home, and she attacked him with all her might. Not knowing it was Agnes under the armor, he attacked her back, striking her in the chest. She collapsed and died immediately. After the battle, Braunsberg lifted the visor of the armor, and to his horror, he found Agnes dead. He fled from the castle and was never seen again, at least not alive. And with that, folks, we will be back after this short break. You are listening to Ghost Talk Radio on WBHM-DB.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Ghost Talk Radio. With me as your host, Shelly Robertson. And if you just tuned in, I invite you all to join me in the Spreaker chat, where you can ask me any questions you might have. And if you missed the first part of the show, no worries. You can catch the full show archive on Spreaker, Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio at your leisure. And as a matter of fact, we are on many different platforms. So whatever listening service you use, we're probably there. Now, before the break, I was talking about the haunting of Elt's Castle, and Knight Bronsberg had just realized he had killed Agnes, and he fled the castle, never to be seen again, right? Now, many people believe that Agnes is still in the castle, protecting it from attack, and it is said that she often wanders the halls, opening and closing doors, moving objects throughout the castle. And in the Countess's room in the castle, you can see the armor that she wore during this battle. Is that amazing? It's still hanging on the wall. That would be amazing. There are also visions of a knight seen outside the castle, often late at night, riding his horse back and forth in front of the gates of the castle. And some people believe that these are the knights of the castle still protecting it. However, the Eltz family believes that this is Knight Bronsberg waiting for Agnes, as she never forgave him for her death. Now, been a lot of staff that's reported that often in the morning, they'll come in to open up the castle, and the large wooden doors will, they left and they were locked. And when they get there, all those doors throughout the castle are all open and unlocked, as if somebody were wandering the castle at night. They also say that many times after they leave at night, they'll come back in the morning to find items moved, even very heavy cannons that are on display throughout the castle. And it's been reported at night, you can hear whispers and giggling as if children are playing in the halls. And they say if you wait long enough at night, you might catch a glimpse of Knight Bronsberg himself sitting on his horse waiting for Agnes to forgive him and become his wife. Eerie stuff there, folks. Eerie stuff. The next place we are going to be, and it's our last stop on our castle journey tonight, and it is the Dragsholm Castle in Denmark. Now, this castle today, I'll tell you, in today's world, it is now a luxury hotel complete with a golf course and a Michelin star restaurant, and it proudly stands between meadows and the lakes on the island of Zealand in Denmark. Now, it was built as a palace in 1215 by Peter Sunsen, the Bishop of Roskilde, and let me tell you, it's reportedly one of the most haunted castles in Europe. It is said to have at least 100 ghosts who wander its corridors, but there are 3 hauntings in particular for which the Dragsholm Castle is most famed. The Earl of Bothwell, the White Lady, and the Grey Lady, a troublesome lord, a desolate girl who was bricked into a wall, and a great protector. And to better understand their stories, we need to take a look back into the castle's 800 years of history, right? From its beginnings as a grand palace, Dragsholm was strongly fortified during the Middle Ages. And it was actually the only castle to survive Denmark's Civil War of 1534 to 36, known as the Count's Feud. However, after the revolution, ownership of the Dragsholm Castle was passed to the crown, and for the period of 1536 to 1664, it served as a prison. This was actually the darkest period for the castle, right? Prisoners held there were noblemen of the region who may have even previously resided in or visited Dragsholm in its grander days. And let me tell you, then followed the Protestant Reformation as Lutheranism spread throughout Denmark, and the Catholic Church eventually became outlawed, if you can believe that. Dragsholm came to, it also housed a number of bishops and other, famed inmates, right? Among the prisoners were a number of rather famous inmates, such as Joachim Renaud, who was the last Catholic bishop, and ironically, he once owned the place. Can you believe that? James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell, and 3rd husband to Mary, Queen of Scots. And here he is, the first ghost on our list, folks, and that is James Hepburn. Okay, he was, a particularly disruptive Scottish noble, and, trouble seemed to follow him everywhere he went, and he was barely out of one scrape before he was in the next. And after fleeing for his life from Scotland in 1567, Hepburn hoped to take refuge somewhere that would be, more favorable. Unlucky for him, a storm forced his ship to land in Norway, which was then ruled by Denmark, where he was arrested for not having the correct identification papers. Some of his past misdemeanors caught up with him, okay? And this was, of course, in the shape of an influential, jilted former fiancée. And her name was Anna. Okay? He had run off with her dowry. And coupled with the fact that it was known that the English were keen to catch up with him regarding the murder of his current wife's second husband, okay? So now he's wanted for murder. He's wanted for stealing a dowry. The Danish king eventually sent the Earl of Bothwell to Dragsholm. Excuse me, folks. Now, it's here that the stories tell us he was chained to a pillar and given only enough food and water to keep him alive. The legend says that Hepburn went insane during the 10 years he was locked in Dragsholm Castle, and he spent that time pacing around as a pillar until he died in April 1578. They said he wore a circular groove in the floor that can still be seen there to this day. And even though his body was removed from the castle, his spirit remained behind, right? And the ghost of the Earl is heard rather than seen. People report the sound of horse hooves in the courtyard, sometimes accompanied by a fully loaded carriage. So the phantom horse and carriage. And let me tell you, there is so much here that has went on at this castle. This castle was a prison, right? And the castle remained in shambles during 1658 to 60, okay, and squalor until it was given by the king to a grocer named Heinrich Muller. And it was given to him as payment of a debt. And Muller began to restore the castle. But the Baroque-style renovation, that look that we encounter today, it was completed by its next owner, Frederick Adler. And this fella bought the castle in 1694. And it remained in the Adler family until 1932. And with no further heir, the Central Land Board took up the deeds of ownership, okay? Now, 5 years later, the castle was bought by this fella, J.F. Botcher, and it remains today under the management of the Butcher family. Now, the architecture that we encounter nowadays remains pretty much unchanged since the 17th century, although some restoration has taken place, once the First World War was over. Now, with this revamp, many of the ballrooms and the saloons were stylized in the late Romantic fashion, okay? Now, it was while repairing the plumbing at some point in the 1930s that workmen made a gruesome discovery. It had long been rumored that the ghostly figure of this young maiden dressed in white who's been seen, walking through the castles, this ghost. And they just figure she's searching for her forbidden lover, and what they found added some weight to her story. Okay, now here's what happened. The tale goes that she was the daughter of one of the many owners of the castle, and it would have been totally unacceptable for a lady of her stature to strike up a relationship with a commoner. But the young lady, who may have been Selina Bovels, she fell in love with a man who worked at the castle. Now, their secret affair was rumbled by her father, who, in a rage, not only locked her in a prison cell in the tower, but he went so far as to brick her up inside the wall, folks. Now, people just thought this was folklore and legend and maybe just another ghost story, The white lady who forever mourned a lost love and was heard crying in her sorrow. They just thought this was all, folklore, until the skeleton of a female clothed in a white gown was discovered inside the wall. Turns out it was true, and evidently the ghost is her. The story of the Gray Lady is a much more lighthearted ghost story, and it tells of this woman who, as a sign of gratitude, she remained to serve in this castle even after her death. And during her days there, this servant, she suffered from a dreadful toothache. Okay, so the master of the house saw to it that she received treatment. And, some accounts say that the treatment did relieve some of her pain, okay. But anyhow, she died soon afterwards, okay. But her spirit remains so grateful for the kindness that she haunts the castle as kind of like a protector and always looking for good deeds to perform. And next, I will tell you quickly what's coming up here at the jail. Coming up on March 27th, we have a celebrity ghost hunt featuring Stephen Doogie McDougal of Haunted Towns Ghost Asylum and Haunted Live, and Jason Hale and Jeremy Lane of the Fearless Forum and the Fearless Ones Paranormal Team. They will be leading a night of ghost hunting here at the Old Paulding Jail. The last time they were here at the jail, we had so much activity. EVP, Shadow Ghost, and the sheriff addressed Doogie by name. It was such a fantastic evening. So if you missed them here the last time they were here in October, now is your time to pick up your tickets, as tickets are limited due to COVID, and they're expected to sell out quickly. Actually, a third of them is already gone. To get your tickets, go to 187pi.com, click on events, and our calendar will pop up, and just click on it and you'll go to our secure server and you can get your tickets and reserve your spot. In April, we'll be rolling out the escape games this year, and the game schedule will soon be on the board. We have private investigation dates available on the board too, and those can also be found at 187PI under events as well. And as always, I'd like to tell you what's going on at our fantastic network. We have some super shows with amazing hosts and interesting guests, and All shows but one is at 8 p.m. Eastern. Sunday nights, we have Fate Mag Radio with host Kat Hobson. Monday nights, we have Paranormal Pride Show with host Denise Pridemore. Wednesday nights, we have Paranormal Experience with host Kat Hobson. And this is the one that's not at 8, it's at 10. Wednesday night, we have at 10 Eastern, we have Soul to Soul Show with host Teal Gray. Thursday nights, we have the Full Spectrum Project with host Peter Havland and Brian Clune. You'll want to be sure to tune in to all those shows every night at 8 p.m. You have a radio date, folks. I want to take a brief moment to thank everyone for listening to tonight's live broadcast. Please remember, be kind and be positive. I wish everyone a very happy weekend. Keep safe and good night, friends.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.